Thank you. Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live stream video at the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consent held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary-Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream page at oakville.ca and if you wish to speak to an item of the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, this number is 905-815-6095. When you call in, staff will ask for your name, item number that you wish to address, and then your telephone number, and further instructions will be provided to join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, you will press *6 to unmute yourself. The applicant or agent will then be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of their application, answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes is provided for the presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record, and any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for each presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair. Any submissions beyond 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns found in the staff report, particularly with any proposed conditions, this will be the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and this will mark the end of the discussion. Any person desiring a notice of a decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary-Treasurer. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consent applications to the applicant, agent, or any other person who has filed a request for such a notice. The last day of the appeal to the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. Only the applicant, specified persons, or public bodies may appeal the committee's decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. In November of 2022, the Bill 23 legislation, the More Homes Built Faster Act, amended the Planning Act to remove appeal rights for members of the public. If no appeal is prescribed within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who has received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in this hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and any other person participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. And once again, the number to call is 905-815-6095. We have no regrets this evening. Do I have any declarations of pecuniary interests? I see none. Thank you. Madam Secretary-Treasurer, I'll now be taking deferrals or withdrawals of applications. Anyone interested in withdrawing or deferring an application, please raise your hand and the Secretary-Treasurer will invite you to speak.
Madam Chair, I've moved over Ross.
Okay. Mr. Delina, go ahead, unmute yourself by pressing *6, and if you have a camera, you can turn it on as well. Is Mr. Delina on the phone or? through the video conferencing.
No,
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah. Oh, we can hear you, we can't see you, but.
Fair enough. I apologize for that. Thank you for hearing us this evening. In discussion with the owner and the planning report we received, he has decided that we need to further review this a little closer to see what he's willing to adjust. And at this point, we're requesting a deferral for that reason. So it seems that he's willing to undergo redesign of the building.
Very well. Mr. Vilina, you're here for CAV 157-2024 at 1238 Donnelly Crescent, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. There has been requests to attend by Mr. Matthew and Jennifer Sandberg and Daniel and Kathleen Ferguson, and there has been a letter of objection that has come through as well from Mr. Daniel and Kathleen Ferguson. If they are in attendance today or they are hearing this, you will get an opportunity to see the redesign and you will get a notice of the application once it has come back into the roster. And Ms. Vilina, I'm sorry, I keep saying Vilina and now I just realized it's an F, sorry.
No problem.
Defina. Mr. Defina, if now that you have it's come to your attention, there are neighbors who have concerns, it'll be good for you to reach out to them as well and speak to them with this matter.
Absolutely.
And you'll see the Secretary Treasurer at your earliest convenience once this matter is deferred, if the committee so agrees. Members, all those in support of a deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Good evening. Anyone else, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
Madam Chair, there is someone on the phone that will be coming into the meeting that wishes to defer as well.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Mr. Castillo is in the meeting now.
Okay. Mr. Castillo, you are here for which item on our agenda?
It's here for 12 Rain Avenue.
Okay, that's CV 161 of 2024.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm representing the homeowner. We, after reading the planning staff comments, the homeowner and I decided that we would like to make some revisions to the drawings. Therefore, we would like to defer the application to improve the variances. We have already done some of the changes, so if we're allowed, we will be making a resubmission this week.
Okay, very well. You'll see the Secretary Treasurer when you are ready to resubmit. Members, all those in support of the deferral? Okay, the application has been deferred. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Madam Secretary Treasurer, I don't see Mr. Dickey online, so we did not have him for this last one, the deferral.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I saw.
Okay. Anyone else waiting?
No, I don't see any hands up right now.
Okay, very well. We'll take the first matter into committee. On our agenda. And that would be item CAV 123 of 2024 at 324 Wendy Lane. Again, that's CAV 123 of 2024 at 324 Wendy Lane. Good evening.
Good evening, committee. Jonathan Minskowski, 301 Keewatin Avenue.
Good evening. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, so the proposal before you today is to construct a new two-story dwelling. There are 3 variances that are before the committee today. What I prepared on the slide here is to deal with the front yard setback request. The intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw as it relates to a minimum front yard setback is essentially a transition of a house along a city block. The idea is not to have one house 10 feet in front, 7 feet behind, 4 feet behind, essentially so it looks like a jigsaw puzzle. So what I've taken here are the adjacent properties next to the subject property. The proposal we have is 11.6 meter front yard setback. If we look on the map that's on the screen here, the adjacent house has a 9.05 meter front yard setback, and the other adjacent house on the other side has a 14.93 meter front yard setback. So in terms of an appropriate transition as it relates to Wendy Lane, we are appropriately addressing the street in terms of how it relates to the streetscape and where it sits on the lot itself. I was a little surprised by some of the planning comments, specifically as it relates to the front yard setback. The reduction we're requesting is for 0.6 meters for 2 feet. In my professional opinion as a planner, that would be entirely indiscernible from the street. The siting of the dwelling is also largely as a result of conservation issues. So the house has undergone numerous redesigns to accommodate a location that conservation is okay with. And as identified in the planning staff, conservation is happy with the location of the dwelling as it sits today. Could we go to the second slide, please? So here's the front elevation as it addresses Wendy Lane. I would like to note that the proposed massing is entirely as per the zoning bylaw. As it sits, the side yard setbacks on one side are compliant and on the other side are in excess of the zoning bylaw requirement. There is no height variance. The dwelling is actually proposed to be below the height requirement. Could you go to the next slide, please? Addressing the comments of the massing in the staff report, again, I was a little surprised by them. What I've done here is I've taken the map. So along this portion of Wendy, there are essentially 7 houses that front Wendy, 4 on the subject property side and 3 on the opposite side. I have scaled this map that again is downloaded from Oakville. So we have the appropriate frontage at 23.16 meters as well as 45.72 meters. I have then cited the dwelling, which is in blue, as it would if this would be a meritorious application. I've then taken this proposed massing of all of these adjacent dwellings on the property. So if we look at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 properties, the average massing of these dwellings as they front Wendy Lane is 22.44 meters. That's an average of, that's an average of 22.44 meters. The massing we are proposing is 16.73 meters. So the actual massing we're proposing is well below what exists on the streetscape today. This would be one of the narrow houses. Now, again, that is also a product of this being a narrower lot. Now, in terms of the coverage and the GFA and how that relates to the siting of the dwelling. If we could go to the next slide, please. I just did a quick little kind of zoning bylaw chart. Again, we see that the minimum interior side yard is in excess at 3.58 meters. The rear yard setback is proposed at 16.07 meters. What that tells me as a planner is this is a deeper lot that is able to accommodate a slightly larger house without causing any undue adverse impacts on the adjacent neighbors. I don't believe there are any adjacent neighbors present in the hearing today, and that might be a reflection of the lack of an impact that they perceive from the proposed new dwelling. In my opinion, the massing fits. The height is below the zoning bylaw requirement by 0.2 meters. The front yard setback request, again, is only for a 0.6 meter reduction. And I believe it would fit in with the neighborhood as a whole, again, with that massing being well below what exists on the subject site. Sorry, on Wendy Lane itself. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee has.
Thank you, Mr. Vizcanowski. Any questions? Go ahead, Mr. Tulowski.
Madam Chair, it seems from your presentation, you spent a lot of time talking about massing, but you were actually talking about the building footprint. And I believe staff concern, and part of my concern is you're taking a building that's largely a full 2-story mass and then trying to move it further forward as well. And in my mind, like, that's the mass, and how you're treating the mass, the design of it, is what potentially is going to cause the impact. I guess my question to you is, why have you not tried to address the impact of the mass by, providing second floor setbacks when you're trying to bring a 2-story wall out in front of the neighboring house?
Through you, Madam Chair, we are only requesting to be in front of one of the neighboring houses. If we go back to my presentation material, and I'll just wait for that to come up. If we go to page 1, please. Yeah, as you see on page 1, number 1208, Wendy Lane has a front yard setback that exists at 9.05 meters. So in terms of being in front of the adjacent house, we're actually significantly behind number 1208 and in front of the adjacent property at 316 Wendy Lane. Now, in terms of a transition, in my opinion, that's an appropriate transition. We are stepping it back. Being the second and third house on a street, you're kind of that gateway. Although again, this is a quite a small street with only 4 dwellings. The massing of the house has only been pushed forward by 0.6 meters. In terms of the stepping back to the second floor, again, in my opinion, the mass of the dwelling as it faces the street is contemplated in the zoning bylaw. Again, we are in excess of the side yard setbacks. We are compliant on the one side. And if we go back to the map I made, I believe it is on page, yes, correct here. We see the massing as it fronts the street. If we look directly across the street, the mass at 26.6 meters essentially addresses the whole entirety of that lot. Again, granted, it is a wider lot, but it can accommodate a larger mass. In this instance, our massing is almost 6 meters below what exists on this street today. So as it fronts Wendy, and again, we can even see here the fractured front yard setbacks that exist today, whereas on the bottom of the page, we see a house pushed forward, with the anomaly really being the adjacent dwelling to the subject property that has the 14-meter front yard setback. So I believe it addresses Wendy in an appropriate manner and in an appropriate scale that, again, is below the zoning bylaw requirement for height. We're not even at the 9 meters. We're at 8.8 meters as it fronts Wendy Lane.
Thank you. Any further questions? Mr. Dickey, you didn't attend the entire presentation, correct? Oh, and
Yeah, sorry,
okay, I'll just have you just sit this one out, okay? Anyone else have any further questions? Okay. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer? Has anyone raised their hand?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls and no hands up.
Okay, very well. We'll take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? We'll get the discussion vote. Go ahead, Mr. Trotowski. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I see mass as a three-dimensional object, not a site plan. It's unfortunate that the applicant chose not to put the elevations up on as part of their presentation. Madam Chair, I don't believe the applicant has made an attempt to mitigate what I believe is going to be a significant impact on the one house by asking to bring the house forward and yet just presenting with a full two-story height for all of that house that extends beyond the house on the other side. Having said that, Madam Chair, I don't believe that meets the intent of the bylaw, and I definitely do not believe it's desirable, so I'm going to move the application be denied.
The motion is to deny the application. All those in support? All those opposed? Okay, your application has been denied. Thank you, Mr. Okay, application CAV 154 of 2024 at 92 Forsyth Street. Again, that's CAV 154 of 2024 at 92 Forsyth Street. I have Michael Bateman here as the agent. The number to call with interest for any application is 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095.
My name is Michael Bateman. I'm the architect and the agent for the client of this project. If you'd like, I can do a full presentation, or I can just answer some questions that the committee might have. My address is 1048 Broadview Avenue in Toronto.
Go ahead, Mr. Bateman. You can do your presentation.
Okay. This is a complex of about 13 units, and this is the end unit. And on the north side, we have a parking lot. We're proposing a small sunroom at the end, sunroom or breakfast area. There's out of 13 units, 8 units already have very similar sunrooms. Maybe we can move to the next page. Next page, yeah. This is the layout. Yes, stop on this page. Yes, next page, please. Well, this is the existing layout of townhouse. As you can see, the property line is angled and it kind of cuts the backyard into a kind of parallelogram. So it's very difficult to put something in without coming really close to the property line. You can have a next slide, please. The addition is shown in gray. As you can see, there's only one corner and it's coming very close to the property line, 4.5 meters away from the property line. But it's only just a small corner of the project. It's not really, it's only maybe 15 or 10%. that is actually intruding into the 1.2 meter setback, and it's not making any impact on anybody because there's a parking lot on the north side, on the side where the sunroom is penetrating the setback. And as I said, the rest of the units, most of them already have very similar projections built in the back. Yeah, this is the roof of the proposed structure. Next slide, please. Okay, so it's the roof. Next slide, please. The elevations, if we're looking at the back, you can see there's a garage underneath, access to the garage underneath it. It's kind of a split level. So the yard is kind of halfway between the garage level and the deck level. So this is a raised kind of addition in the back. And it's not, yeah, if we can go to the next slide. As you can see, there's a similar, yeah, the red mark is actually marking the location of the property. And as you can see, there's already very many of these units, so the 13 units, 8 of them already have some very similar additions at the back. As you can see on the north side, there's a parking lot, so it's not really impacting any of the neighbors. None of the neighbors have objections as far as I know. If we can go to the next slide. And yes, I marked the unit in red, and the addition also is marked in red, and the existing similar additions on the other townhouses also marked in yellow, so you can actually clearly see that a lot of them already have very similar additions at the back. And as I said, it's only a very small corner that is penetrating the setback. It's not the full addition, it's just the very corner. And as you can see, there's really very minor impact on anything surrounding it. It's only going to be really visible from the parking lot. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Bacon. Any questions or items of clarification from the applicant? I see none. Ready for motion then? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials, including the written staff report, and having heard the presentation of the agent, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the 4 tests of the Act. The singular variance is really at a singular point due to the shape of the lot, and the impacts will be minimal to none in terms of overlook. Accordingly, the motion of approval will go forward with 2 conditions, those being that the addition be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and an elevation drawings dated October 11th, 2022. And that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction. Thank you.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Application CAV 160 of 2024 at 14 Timber Lane. Again, this is application 160 of 2024 at 14 Timber Lane. I have Miss Tatiana Quintana as the applicant.
Good night, Madam Chair. Good night, members of the committee. I'm the agent for 14 Timberline Lane. This is the existing house. Could you please go to the next slide? Yeah, this is the location of the house. As you can see, that's a small house if we compare with the neighbors. Could you please go to the next slide? What we're asking is we propose to increase the maximum residential floor area radio to 54.38. Could you please go to the next slide? And this is the proposed front elevation. Means we are trying to, because it's heritage, we are trying to don't impact too much on the front elevation, as you can see here. And go to the next slide. Yeah, we have a letter from the neighbor. They say they don't have issue with the application, and we have 2 more emails that they send direct to the city. Also, we applied for the Halton region permit, and we are working on. We apply for we send the report for the tree. And now we are working with the development engineer for the grading plan also.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tanya. We do have a letter of objection from Matthew and Stempine and Suzanne Welch. Have you read the letter?
Yes.
Okay. Madam Secretary, has anyone called with interest to speak to this application?
No, Madam Chair, there have been no calls and no one has their hand up here.
Okay. Are there any questions or items of clarification? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Madam Chair, the letter from the resident, I'm going to classify it as more of a letter of questions than necessarily objection, but I was wondering if the applicant could speak to the questions that are being raised by the neighbor.
Yes, I can talk about that. That means the first question is about the heritage. Yeah, we're working on that from the heritage. And the second question is about that means we submit to the city the arborist report. And we are still working on that. That means we got a tree protection agreement with the city. However, when they start working for development engineering, they are working on the grading plan. They are talking about the tree. That means we're working between development engineering, the grading plan, the tree department, the arborist to just take care of this. That's regarding to number 3. And number 4 is an existing garage that the owner has there. That's the 4 questions. I think it's more questions that they have it, but we're working on that. That means we need to get approved development with the grading plan and also the water management. Yes, we're with the city, with development engineering, working on that.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, let's take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just say a few things. The increase in residential floor area from 43% to 54.3% is numerically high, but we acknowledge that this is a small house surrounded by not much larger houses, but houses that are larger. Part of the reason might be that the subject site is small, whereas the surrounding sites are larger. But in the end, it is my opinion that the property, the variances comply with the 4 tests, and therefore make a motion to approve subject to the condition that. The addition constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated May 23rd, 2024, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Dickey. Is there discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night too.
Application CAV 071 of 2024 at 221 Wedgwood Drive. Again, that's application CAV 71 of 2024 at 221 Wedgwood Drive, deferred from May the 1st of 2024.
Madam Chair, I think you just skipped over 262 King Street.
Did I?
CAVA 162, 2024.
Oh, my apologies. Got cut off on my sheet here. Okay. Back to item 6.6, CV 162 of 2024 at 262 King Street. That's CAV 162 of 2024 at 261 King Street. Mr. Mail or Mr. Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee member. My name is Ala Makur, and I'm the agent for the homeowner of 262 King Street, Mr. and Mrs. Mill. Today, we bring in front of you three minor variances. One for the front setback to decrease it from 6 meters to 2.8. Second one is the maximum lot coverage to increase it from 25% to 29.74. And the third one is for the gross floor area to increase it from 30% to 37.6. I read the staff report, and I'm really appreciative of the support. Unless it's needed, I will just leave it to the staff to discuss. If there's any question, I'll be here to answer.
Are there any questions or items of clarification to Mr. McClure? Okay, we'll put in a motion then. Go ahead, Mr. Towski.
Madam Chair, I believe you were
again,
myself.
I'm so sorry. I apologize. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, having reviewed the materials and heard the presentation from the agent, I am satisfied that the requested variances conform to the four tests of the Act. And I will put forward a motion of approval subject to conditions, those being that the dwelling be built in my apologies, just the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated September 30th, 2024, and that the approval will expire in 2 years, within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you. Great night.
Good night.
Bye.
I apologize, Mr. Hardcastle. Okay, now we're back at Wedgwood. CV 071 of 2024 at 221 Wedgwood Drive. Application CV 071 of 2024 at 221 Wedgwood Drive. Again, the number to call of interest for any application is 905-815-6095. Go ahead, Mr. Demchik.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Paul Demchik, Victoria Planning and Management. I'm the planning consultant on behalf of the applicant for 221 Wedgwood, and I prepared a brief presentation for this evening. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the subject site, it's a rectangular shaped lot with about 37 meters of frontage on Wedgwood Drive. It's currently occupied by an existing single detached dwelling. That includes a reverse grade driveway on the north side of the site, which leads to obviously the below grade garage. The application was previously deferred by the Committee of Adjustment on May the 1st of this year. And there was a number of requested variances, which I will show in a minute. The property is obviously among many homes which have been recently reconstructed, which are not necessarily unique to this neighborhood. And obviously in many instances have received variances for, in some cases, considerable increases in height, coverage, and floor area, depending on the context of the site and the design of the dwelling. Next slide, please. So the proposed dwelling comprises of a two-story single detached dwelling with an overall floor area of approximately 491 square meters. The dwelling covers 27.8% of the property, and the height of the dwelling is 9.15 meters. A new circular driveway is proposed and is designed to mitigate impacts on the existing tree canopy within the public right-of-way. And significant tree planting is proposed on the site, and specifically within the front yard. Further, the building has been sited to fit appropriately on the site, which meets all setback requirements of the zoning bylaw. And I'll speak more of the architectural home in a minute, but if I could go to the next slide, please. So again, in the May 2024 staff report, staff did object to the variances proposed at that time. And as shown in this chart, all the variances have been reduced and removed in the case of the driveway entrance width, and I will note that one variance to the maximum driveway width was added as it was not captured at the time of the May hearing. Notwithstanding this, we have in fact reduced the driveway width from the original proposal and further increased soft landscaping and proposed planting in the front yard since that time. So obviously there's a number of variances required, and I'd like to just briefly go through some of them. If I could take you to the next slide, please. So this is the front elevation of the dwelling. Just in terms of overall massing intent, obviously a number of the build form provisions in the bylaw, including coverage, height, and floor area, obviously are intended to assist in regulating a potential massing of a dwelling. So this proposed design obviously features an entry portico and a roof line and built form features that provide a variety of building proportions in the architecture of the home. These massing approaches, in my opinion, do contribute to breaking up of the building mass. It diminishes the perception of building skill from the street. And the building also locates some of the second floor area within its roof line, which also further diminishes the perception of building mass in the street. Further, the dwelling does include a number of unenclosed building components, including a rear single-story covered terrace, as well as a small front porch, which do assist in breaking up the massing of the home. And obviously these are included within the overall permitted coverage provisions, albeit these features help mitigate massing and don't actually impact, at least from my perspective, negatively the overall massing of the dwelling. Further, the increase of the height is only for a small portion at the center line of the roof. And you can see that on the screen that's highlighted in red on this image, whereas the majority of the roof line does fall under the maximum height. And further, there is an excess side yard setback from the side yard lot lines, which excess further in relation to the zoning bylaw requirements. And further, there's also an approximately 1 meter difference in grade from the north property line to the south property line, which does slightly obviously impact the established grade and the design of the dwelling on this lot. Next slide, please. This is just the side elevation. This shows the various proportions, again, which have been provided in the design of the dwelling, which helped, again, just to break up the mass to the best extent possible. Next slide, please. So we have worked, I would say, diligently with staff in leading up to this application. Like I said, it became, last we were here was May. And so a number of changes have occurred to not only the design of the dwelling, but also the proposed front yard landscaping. So in terms of the driveway width, it's obviously the intent to ensure that reasonable vehicular access can be provided without hard surface treatment of the driveway dominating a given front yard. And the driveway width has obviously been measured at the widest part of the driveway, which is located on the southern side of the front of the dwelling, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, which is located in front of the proposed garage doors. Again, the driveway features a circular design, which is permitted as of right. And again, this driveway design is further mitigated with significant planting in the front yard. You can see there's significant planting beds and tree planting that is shown in this image, as well as the rendering. Further, I will note that the driveway design has been limited to 4 meters in width for significant portions of this driveway, again, to limit its impacts on the streetscape. And as I noted earlier in my presentation, the majority of the driveway has been reduced in its overall width from the original application submission. Just related to the proposed garage, so the garage is on the first floor. It's a 3-car garage. However, the design of the garage includes a third door, which is the one on this image that is inset from the other 2 doors. And it features an architectural style where the actual garage door appears to look like a window. And it's similar to the architecture proposed for the windows of the main dwelling. And again, further significant tree and vegetation planting is also proposed, again, to further mitigate any impacts on the garage. Next slide, please. So again, this is the rendering that was submitted as part of the application. You can see the garage design. You can see obviously what's intended from a tree planting and landscaping perspective and how that is intended to mitigate both the driveway design as well as the garages. Next slide, please. So just in brief summary, again, it's my opinion that the proposed variances do meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. I will also note that a no objection report from staff has been provided this evening. 2 letters of support were submitted to the committee, and 1 letter with a number of questions was submitted. Those questions did relate to trees, drainage, and landscape retaining walls, which I'm more than happy to address to the committee if the committee sees fit. But this does conclude my presentation, and I'd be more than happy to assist and answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Demchak. Have there been any calls or interest to speak with regard to this presentation?
No, Madam Chair, no calls and no hands up.
Thank you. Are there any questions or items of clarification from committee members? Mr. Ptowski, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Demchak, I'm struggling with this application because I'm really failing to see any discernible difference in the design from your May application. But in particular, I'd like you to expand on how you believe the driveway size and width meet the intent of the bylaw, when I believe the intent of the restrictions in the bylaw are to prevent exactly what you're proposing, that being 3 doors on the street and an exceptionally wide driveway.
Yes, if I could ask the committee to pull up the presentation again and specifically go to the rendering image. Actually, sorry, maybe one more slide before that. Maybe we'll start there. Thank you. Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, and to Member Pileski, you're absolutely right. It is the intent to try to mitigate impacts in the zoning bylaw of potential 3-car garages in many instances, and the stable residential guidelines as well further speak to that, to try to mitigate that to the best extent possible. Now, in saying that, I've worked on and I've been before this committee many times before where we've done designs to try to mitigate those impacts to the best extent possible. In some cases, you have 3-car garages or driveway designs where in some cases we are doing it on the side of the dwelling, so it mitigates impact from a streetscape perspective. In this instance, that was not obviously available or not provided in the design. So what we've done in this instance is twofold. So the first is, you can see there's an indentation of the massing of the dwelling where there's the 2-car garage on the far right side of the screen. And then the 3rd-car garage, or the 3rd-car parking for the garage, is slightly inset into the dwelling, and that matches the proportions of the dwelling design, at least from my perspective, appropriately from a design perspective. I also mentioned that very, very, I would say carefully, the client has gone to great extent to find an architectural material that works in terms of making sure that that 3rd garage will absolutely not look like a garage door. We've done that on many instances, and I have been before this committee, I think recently on a file on Balsam, where we did something similar to mitigate the impact of that 3rd garage, so that it was not perceptible as a garage from a streetscape perspective. Finally, you're absolutely right just on the driveway design. The driveway design and the intent of the driveway with provision in the bylaw is to try to mitigate massing impacts from the streetscape perspective. What we've done in other instances, and what I'm suggesting to the committee in this instance, is we've tried our best to mitigate that design of the driveway from a streetscape perspective by ensuring that obviously there's significant planting that is being provided in this instance. We've reduced the 2 widths of the driveway, both in terms of the entrance, but also the majority of the driveway, both in front of the porch of the dwelling and on the left side or north side of the property in this instance. And again, the driveway design, it's only at its widest point where there's the 3rd garage, and then to the pinch point at the bottom corner. Obviously, from my perspective, the driveway is significantly set back from the streetscape. I think we're providing significant amount of oak trees, which are going to mitigate those driveway impacts to the best extent possible.
Thank you, Mr. Dunter. Any further questions? Okay. If there hasn't been any calls or hands up, we'll take the matter into committee, Madam Secretary Treasurer.
No, Madam Chair, no calls, no hands up.
Very well. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Madam Chair. Obviously, well, there appears to be some concern, or there is some concern about the width of the driveway and shall we say the number of doors in the front. I thought about that, but I also recognize that this lot is extremely wide. I think it's 37 meters wide. So that's not like dealing with a three-car garage that's on a narrow lot. So in the end, I feel the variances are minor in nature and meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and therefore I put forth a motion that we approve the variances, subject to the condition that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan, concept, landscape plan, and elevations drawings dated September 17th, 2024. And the approval expires 2 years from the date of decision if the building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Mr. Tadowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm not going to be supporting this motion. I don't see how any of the changes made have addressed the concerns raised in the staff report of May. I think they're all minor tweaks. Surprised that staff report went from total opposition to total support when the 2 drawings that they put in the staff report are virtually identical. And I'm having difficulty with the solution to the 3-car garage doors being to actually increase the massing of the face of the garage and increase the size of one of the doors. And it's disappointing that the applicant's choosing to say they, as of right, can put in a circular driveway, but they want more than that, but they don't want to give up the circular driveway as mitigation. So, Madam Chair, I do not believe this is mine or will not be supporting the motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Talowski. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My thinking aligns very closely with Mr. Talowski. As was stated, the drawings, the design is minimally different with tweaks of numbers. I continue to have significant reservations with respect to the amount of hard surface area and the massing of the building. So likewise, I will not support the motion on the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. The motion is to approve the application that is set before us with the set forth conditions. All those in support? Okay. All those opposed? Okay, and the chair abstains. So this motion has failed. Who would like to make a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Madam Chair, for the reasons I've stated, I do not believe that this application meets the intent of the zoning bylaw, nor do I find the design to be desirable for the development of this property. As such, I will move that the application be denied.
Thank you. All those in support? Okay, all those opposed? Okay, and the chair abstains. The application has been denied. Thank you, Mr. Demchak.
Thank you.
Okay, application CAV 074 of 2024 at 1140 Invicta Drive. Again, that's CAV 074 at 2024 1140 Invicta Drive. And this one was deferred from May the 15th. Go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Hello, Madam Chair. My name is Adrian Latavsky, and I am a planning consultant here acting as the agent for the applicant. And as you mentioned, this is a deferral, returning from a deferral from May. And since that time, we've had an opportunity to meet with staff and to discuss at length the concerns that they had expressed about the application. And we went away from those meetings and significantly changed the proposal in order to address the concerns that we've heard. And I want to, also express that we're here really to pursue the required approvals, and the real purpose of this hearing is to just seek the assurance that the use in question is permitted. But to give a little bit further background for the committee, to be clear, we are in fact seeking after the fact zoning relief. We acknowledge that the applicant erroneously proceeded to enter into a lease agreement for part of their property here, and we have an image of the property outlined in red. And we actually, in this aerial, can see the parking area that was put in place, but without the proper zoning or other municipal approvals required. And this was indeed a mistake. And so our purpose here and with this application is to rectify the situation, to go back and seek the approvals that were indeed required. And so this application is really a first step as we see it. And it's not really, I believe, the committee here to look at this past behavior and look at what kind of discipline might be rendered as being due to those activities. The town has other options to pursue. They're here instead in this forum, we're looking to at the appropriateness of the proposal and to seek the required zoning relief. So I have indeed submitted a planning justification letter, and in that letter, I provided a fairly detailed review of the history of this proposal, of the previous submission that was put before the committee, and the changes that we have now made, and the changes to the variances that we're seeking. And likewise, I have provided a fairly detailed review of the 4 tests. I can assure you that I've looked at this, and it is indeed my opinion that the 4 tests are satisfied. And so just to go through the changes that are proposed since the last time the committee saw this, if I could ask you to advance to the next slide, please. Here we have an image of the proposal that was originally put before the committee last May, and which reflected the situation on the ground at that time. And what was the case in that situation is that there is a storage compound that we were seeking approval for tractor trailers. And the situation is that the applicant, Industry Diesel, which has operated their manufacturing facility here for quite a number of years, they entered into a lease arrangement with the Musket Transportation Company that leased the remaining lands on the property there that you see outlined in red, and to store the tractor trailers that they use as part of their transportation company. So what Musket Transportation is they are a transportation firm that specializes in delivering goods across North America. They're quite a large and extensive company. They operate a number of different facilities around the GTA, and they in fact operate it's a number of transportation terminals. This is not one of them. The transportation terminals that they operate are actually nearby in Mississauga. What this compound is for is to store the tractor trailers that ultimately must be hooked up into the trailers and then, of course, deliver the goods around North America. But they are a bonded company, and as part of maintaining that bond, they have to meet certain security requirements, one of which is to store the tractor trailers separate from the trailers and goods that they are delivering, which remain at the transportation terminals. So the tractor trailers must be stored separately on an entirely different property within a secure compound that is guarded 24/7. And that's what this facility is all about. When we came forward back in May, it covered this large area here, and the concerns that we heard from staff that they felt this was too large, they were concerned about impacts. And so we went away and considered that further. So if I could ask you to advance to the next slide, please. So what we've come back with here, and come back with a rather amended application. The applicant, as a show of good faith, has actually made changes on the ground in an effort to reduce the impact of this facility. But we are proposing a compound that is much, much smaller. It in fact now occupies only 25% of the site. And so this relates directly to the variance that we're seeking before the committee today. So we're reducing the size of the compound and are asking the permission for a parking area heavy vehicle as defined by the zoning bylaw. So in this zone, which is an E2 zone, a parking area heavy vehicle is in fact a permitted use. It would be permitted as of right, but subject to one condition, and that is that it is an accessory use to the primary use. Otherwise, what we are showing here is a compound that is designed to meet all the other zoning requirements. So a parking area heavy vehicle must be no larger than 25% of the lot area. There are restrictions on the size and placement of any kind of guardhouse. There are setback restrictions. There are screening requirements. It is the applicant's intent to meet all of these requirements. But the one requirement that can't be met because the nature of the arrangement they reached with Musket Transportation is that it is not accessory. It is in fact, this compound is being leased by a separate corporate entity and is operated by them. I put to you that if the applicant in fact owned and operated this facility, we wouldn't actually be here today. It would be permitted as of right. But that is really just that is the only variance that we're seeking. Now, I do note that in staff's report, they characterize it in two parts, that they characterize it as two variances. I put to you that it's really one. It's just that the requirement that a parking area heavy vehicle be accessory is expressed in two different parts of the bylaw. One is in the definition of a parking area heavy vehicle, and then the second is as a section under the E2 zone where it talks about accessory uses. So, but it really is just that one provision, the fact that it's not accessory in this case, that we're seeking relief for. Now, what I would like to reply to, and hopefully I want to get through this as quickly as possible, is that staff, we understand and we know, we have had a chance to read it. They have provided you with a report where they still continue to express objections. And in reviewing it, I see that their objections are really twofold, and I'd like to reply to that. So firstly, staff object because they say they have not had an opportunity to review this project in any detail, this proposal in any detail. The site plan was not submitted. We acknowledge that. And staff has not had the opportunity to review things such as a grading plan or to ensure what kind of landscaping buffering is provided. Really just what you would normally get through a site plan application process. And we acknowledge that wasn't pursued. We say to you, the committee, that the client, my client, the applicant, is indeed favorable to going through such a process. If the committee sees fit, they can even impose that as a requirement or a condition of approval. And I think, but I put to the committee as well, this kind of approval to resolve the use question is an important first step that I believe we need to address first before you can go through that process. And so we're happy to address staff's concern that way. If they want a site plan or they want to look at this in more detail, we'd be happy to do so with them. Secondly, staff has expressed a concern that by virtue of the fact that the tenancy of this situation is Musket is leasing the facility and operating it, and Industry Diesel, the applicant and the primary user, is not. They're saying that that means that it is somehow fundamentally different. It is somehow fundamentally not a parking area heavy vehicle. And my response to that is that I disagree with that. The reality is what we're dealing with here is an objection to the tenancy of the situation here. If we are committing, and subject to, of course, to the committee's approval of this one variance, to comply with all other aspects of the parking area heavy vehicle use within the zoning bylaw. The fact that it's Musket operating this facility rather than Industry Diesel, I think it's entirely appropriate to grant that exception. If Industry Diesel was operating this facility in the exact same manner, we wouldn't be here. I've said that before, I'll just say that again. It would be permitted as of right. And so I would even go so far as to suggest that it almost reads like staff may be trying to regulate the user rather than the use. And I put to you that what we're proposing here, the actual use is no different and would have no different effect and no different impact on surrounding properties just because Musket is leasing it and operating the facility. So that's how I would respond to staff's objections. I have stated that if the committee sees fit, they can make the approval conditional upon site plan. If the committee so likes, as part of the question and answer section, we can talk about wording. I leave that to you, of course. I have indeed reviewed the 4 tests, and I realize I may be running out of time. I don't see a timer on the facility here, but I will wrap it up. I have given you a very detailed response to the 4 tests, and I'm happy to answer respond to my opinion on any of those tests as part of your question and answer period. That's what I have to say, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. I did, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I did leave you a little bit of extra time, given that we do have it. Questions from the committee members? Okay, Mr. Tarowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I will agree with you. The fact that the applicant didn't follow the rules is not a fifth test that the committee has to look at. But having said that, the committee also has to view it as if this wasn't already in place and what would the results be. Could you help me out a little more? I'm oversimplifying your presentation, but to a degree, I heard we comply with every other provision of the bylaw, so it shouldn't matter that we're not a permitted use. And I'm not sure in my mind anyway that you've adequately justified how converting an accessory use to a primary use meets the intent of the official plan and the bylaw.
I think my response to that, for you, Madam Chair, is that the use here is, I'm just pointing out the intent is to work with the town to ensure that physically speaking, the actual shape and nature of the use on the ground complies with the other provisions. I think that's important because it is the applicant's intent through this process of trying to rectify what happened to make sure that the bylaw is indeed complied with. It's just that in that one provision, the fact that Muscat has entered into this lease and is operating this compound, that is one aspect of the bylaw that just in this situation cannot be complied with. And that's why we seek relief here at the committee. To answer your question, I do point out that the parking area heavy vehicle is in fact a permitted use. It is subject to the one qualification that's it's accessory. So let's focus on that word accessory and the difference of what that actually means to the activity on the ground. And what I was trying to suggest in my presentation is that it is quite possible and that if it was industry diesel, the applicant or any other user of the existing building, they could operate what is in effect the same compound, a parking area where storing the same number of trucks that go in and out at the same rate. It is quite possible that they could do that and it would function exactly the same, except that the ownership would be that it's the primary user is operating that as a compound. I'm just trying to draw that distinction that if Industry Diesel was operating this compound as part of their business, it could function exactly the same as Muscat is using it and still be permitted as of right. And so my suggestion is that in this particular instance, I don't believe the actual use on the ground, the number of trucks being stored, the number of times they go in and out of that facility could be exactly the same, even with the tendency being what it would otherwise be under the bylaw as an accessory use. The fact is that they just happen to have a lease arrangement with someone else at the moment. So I'm just saying that the use could be exactly the same. I hope I made that point clear.
Does Industry Diesel store the same type of trucks on their portion as the portion that's being leased right now?
They no, they don't have, as part of their operation here, in the past, they didn't store vehicles. I'm just suggesting that another user like them or another user could use this property in the same way with the same compound. That is a scenario that is permitted under the bylaw, if indeed if it was the same user using the compound in the main facility.
Okay, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions around your last comments. It seems to me that your conversation and evaluation of accessory focuses on the impact of the truck parking on the area, as opposed to what it contributes to the functioning of this as an employment area. I wonder if you might be able to explore a little bit more for me, what this would do to contribute to the employment needs of this specific area in terms of the town.
Well, I think I'd point out to my response to that is Muscat, this kind of transportation use it's a very important part of the economy. They are an important employer. They bring, I'm unfortunately, Mr. Hardcastle, through Madam Chair, I unfortunately don't have specific dollar values in front of me, and I have to admit that I wish I did. But right now, today, let me rephrase that. Before this facility came forward, before the truck parking was put in place, this site was just vacant. It was just empty land. It was unused land, and this is a way to put it into further use, to intensify the employment use, and I think that it is indeed an important employer. It's a very large company that contributes to the local and regional, and for that matter, national economy. And again, I guess I just segue back that I just think of different scenarios that I have in my mind, that it is entirely possible and permitted under the bylaw that a very, looking at the image that I have on my screen, which is in fact the first image from that slide, perhaps I could ask staff to put that slide back up. And this is the first page of the presentation. Thank you very much. Just go back to the first page. Thank you very much. And so just looking at this, now I asked the committee to use their imagination a little bit, because this is an aerial of the original situation where all of the lands at the back were being used for storage. And in response to staff's concerns, that has now in fact been changed on the site. The storage area has in fact physically been reduced to occupy only 25% of the lands. But my point being that right now in this aerial, you see the white building is used by Industry Diesel, the applicant, for their particular manufacturing use. And then the storage area is leased and used by Muscat. But it is an entirely possible and a reasonable scenario to see and imagine that this parcel was used by another manufacturing or employment use that could use the exact same building and still have and use the same storage area for trucks and use it in essentially the same way as being used now with my client and Muscat. And the impacts would be no different, but the difference would be is that because it was under the same tenancy, they would in fact be permitted as of right. So I guess that's just the similarity I'm trying to point out to the committee.
Thank you, and further through you, Madam Chair. I think you maybe perhaps either I was not clear enough, or you maybe didn't quite respond directly to where I was trying to go with that, and that is as an accessory use to something that's primary. There's a primary use that contributes with employment, spin-off, like employees in the area, spin-off, industry benefits, that kind of thing, and it would be directly related to contributing to what's going on. And further, it would allow for the protection of these lands for use as a primary employment use. That was the difference that I was attempting to address. And so this isn't just about impact of having trucks entering onto and being parked on the site. This is about the availability of employment lands to serve the primary purpose is really where I was going with this. I have another sort of series of questions, or perhaps a single question, and we'll go from there. But you'd made some commentary about the staff report and about some of the information that they did not have available in order to address some of their concerns. And you spoke to the ability to address those through site plan, through an implementation tool like site plan. But I would suggest that some of the things that staff raised, noise, traffic study, that kind of thing, is directed towards the feasibility of the use. What is your thought in terms of that?
My thought is all of those studies would be required as part of site plan, and they would all be provided as part of site plan. Those are in fact fairly standard study requirements in a site plan application. And truthfully, in my own professional opinion, the fact that this storage area, this parking area, is operated by someone other than the primary owner of the property, it means it will not function any differently. I truthfully, honestly believe that. I think that the idea that this parking area is somehow appropriate if owned and operated by the primary tenant, but is then not appropriate if owned and operated by someone else. I don't see that. I mean, a traffic study is not necessarily going to see anything different. The noise study, it's an important issue, don't get me wrong, it is an important issue, but that is a standard requirement as part of a site plan application in an employment area like this anyway. So, and one thing I do want to point out, just for the community's benefit, is that a noise review was conducted by the applicant as part of the initial submission back in May, and it was part of our initial submission. So that is in fact on file with the town right now, where we have a noise consultant has looked at this and rendered a review and confirmed that in their opinion, the noise levels are entirely appropriate and in fact fall within the ambient of the area, and it does not result in any, in their opinion, adverse effect upon adjacent uses. And that was premised, frankly, on the larger parking area that you see here, which now the applicant has significantly reduced. So, having said that, staff have said that they would prefer that as part of a site plan exercise, they would have such a study peer reviewed, and that likewise is a fairly standard requirement. So I think these concerns are adequately, more than adequately addressed through the site plan process.
Would staff kindly yeah, thank you. Any further questions or items of clarification? Mr. Dickey, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few things, hopefully they'll be quick answers. Is Musket or Industrial Diesel the owner of the property, or are they both just tenants?
No, the Industry Diesel owns the entire property.
Okay. So right now, Musket would lease up the side, I guess you call it the west side or southwest side, and across the whole rear. And we're being asked to allow them to use only part of that. So there'll be the full rear that'll be left over for whatever happens in the future.
Well, the permission that we're seeking here is very specifically crafted to address that concern. We are asking for the use permission of a parking area heavy vehicle, which is in turn, as I mentioned, subject to these other zoning restrictions, which is fully the intent to comply with. And one of those is that this parking area cannot exceed 25% of the lot area. And so it has indeed been reduced to comply with that. And then there are other setback things, and there are other screening requirements that it's surely the intent to comply with. And as I mentioned, we expect would be addressed through whatever further review we go through with staff.
Okay, thank you. I wonder if I could ask a question to the town planner, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
So to the town planners, this were to proceed and they were to come forward later and provide a noise study and a traffic study, but the town doesn't agree, or the traffic study and the noise study shows that there's problems, could the planning department then say no to this? And that would end all this, or what would be that step? It's just a matter of my point of view first. From the owner or the applicant's point of view, they go through and see if this, if we approve this use, and then go through the site plan. And if the planning department has the opportunity or whatever, they say no to it, that means what we did is irrelevant. Or do we make the applicant go through these studies and everything else first, and then come back to us and ask us if we think that use is okay? I'm just wondering which is first. So that's what I'm wondering about. What could happen in the site plan approval process that would turn around and say no to this and disallow
it? Through you, Madam Chair, it's my opinion that this information would help inform the four tests and whether it would be appropriate to have this use. So I do not think it would be appropriate to have that as a separate former process after this one. Which I think I've made clear through my comments that we would need this information before we could even determine whether this use was appropriate.
Okay, so let's say that I thought this use was fine, except for the noise impact on the residential people on the other side of the channel that are up on the hill. So if that was my opinion, and I could say yes to this applicant, but subject to a satisfactory noise study and maybe a traffic study, though I don't think that's as big a deal because you're in an industrial area off the North Service Road. But I am thinking in terms of yes with condition. And if we, I don't know what our steps might be, maybe we should do this as a two-step process. If we get to the yes with my fellow committee members, that's fine. Then we might want to come back and sort out what the conditions are. Madam Chair and the town planner, I wonder if that's a way to deal with this, having now knowing the way I'm thinking.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think the conditions would be in the control of the committee, what you feel would be appropriate to satisfy any concerns that you may have. And as a committee, you would then determine what conditions could be appropriate. If at that time I may be able to provide recommendation for what they could sound like, but at this point, I think I'm clear that I don't think that would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
And should this get approved, is it subject to the term of the lease and should end at the time that the lease ends? In terms of a permitted use, or once this permitted use within this scenario goes through, then it's a blanket for future?
Is this a question to staff or to the committee? Because
yes, to the staff.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, we have had variances that have a time frame on them, and so they would be a temporary use, but that would have to be very clearly placed in the variances that are requested and the conditions that are in place. So that would be something that, as a committee, you could explore the conditions. But I do caution that any condition that is provided would have to be, I think the right word, achievable by the applicant. So you couldn't provide a condition that would be considered undue, unable to be fulfilled. So I just, in terms of, if you are thinking about conditions, just be cautious about the types of conditions that you consider imposing on the applicant if you were to allow this use to occur.
Okay. I just have one more question, Mr. Latapsky. Why didn't you seek a deferral and go about this in a different way where you can provide all the information versus this, in my opinion, kind of a backdoor way?
Sorry, Madam Chair, this is a question to me?
Yes.
Of course. Well, the reality is we did have a deferral from the May hearing, and we had a meeting with staff, and they were quite adamant in their objection to that original proposal. And so the takeaway that we got from that is that their concerns on that were related to size and noise impacts. We already had a study in hand, as I mentioned, from a well-respected noise consultant that, in their opinion, they did not feel there was a significant noise issue based on that larger proposal, but still we heard staff's concern. And so the intent was just to change the nature of our request, because you might also recall that we were actually asking for a different use in that original submission. At that time, we were characterizing it as a parking, a motor vehicle parking compound, which at that time, in my opinion, better reflected the nature of the compound then, which was larger. But by reducing it, we realized that we could go for the permission that we have in front of you right now, because it was otherwise allowed in this zone. It was just, we could not comply with that one accessory provision. And of course, in the same breath, it also addressed the size concern. And we believe any kind of traffic concerns and noise concerns, because the size was reduced significantly. And so we have indeed tried to address staff's concern, but they have, we're doing our best. I really don't know how else to say it. We're doing our best, and staff has not expressed really an interest in going through the site plan process as yet. And they did not request these studies themselves. They just really objected, and we're trying to work with staff. If they are willing to receive the studies, as was mentioned here, as a condition of approval, or the tying it to the lease, these are all interesting possibilities. And I have obviously not, these are kind of landing on the table right now, so clearly I've not had an opportunity to consult with my client just yet, but I can say, in my own opinion, these do seem like interesting and promising possibilities.
How long has Muscat leased this portion from industry for?
This has been ongoing for some time. I do have that information. I'll have to look it up for you.
Okay. While you do that, you can answer questions from Mr. Hardcastle.
Of course.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question I'm directing towards staff.
Okay.
We typically do not, as a committee, do not see a lot of variances with respect to use. We see, and when we have, we've seen commentary about other processes. The one that keeps coming to mind in my head is a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment. Why are we seeing this here? And has staff had any thought? As I look through and I hear some of the commentary from the consultant and I've read through your report, it strikes me that there's a question of technical supporting materials that would support the feasibility and not necessarily the implementation of this. Things that would benefit from a broader process, whether that be a full-blown rezoning or a temporary use bylaw.
Through you, Madam Chair, I agree with Mr. Hardcastle in that a broader process would inform this, and typically we do not bring or encourage changes in use to come through minor variance. We would encourage that to happen, like you said, through potential rezoning or another process, and the applicant has come forward with this application, and therefore we respond to that application. So I do agree that a broader process to confirm the feasibility is appropriate in this case.
Okay. Is it freezing for everyone, or is it just me?
I think it's just you this time, not me.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Tulowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, similar to Mr. Hardcastle's comments. I think we're letting discussion of site plan detract from the real issue here, and that is of the use and whether it meets the intent of the official plan and bylaw. And my question is for Ms. Tuckerfield. The applicant's asserting that if industry diesel were operating this as opposed to Musket, it would be permitted. Forgive me, but I'm going to quote some chapter and verse from the staff report. It says the bylaw only permits heavy vehicle parking area as an accessory use. I'm adding emphasis here, in association with the primary use on the lot. And then further goes on to say that pursuant to section 14.4.2 of Livable Oakville, accessory uses may be permitted in conjunction with permitted light industrial uses. Accessory retail uses shall be on the same lot and clearly subordinate and directly related to the functioning of the permitted use. So I'm going to extrapolate on that. And I think this is the argument that the applicant's making. So industry diesel could have an accessory retail use on the property that sold the engines that it makes. But I don't believe the intent of the official plan is that industry diesel could put a Canadian Tire retail store that's got nothing to do with its use on the same property, and that would comply. And like I think that's the same argument the applicant's making, that because it's allowed as an accessory use, it's allowed as a primary use, not associated with accessory use. So we've heard the applicant's argument to that nature, but I'd like to hear from staff whether staff are swayed by the applicant's argument that it's just a matter of who's operating it. When I read the staff report, I think the test here is the in association with the primary use.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would say that my comments still stand as written. And I agree that I'm going to maybe quote something here now is just to remind everyone of the definition of an accessory use, which is a use naturally and normally incidental to, subordinate to, and exclusively devoted to a principal use. And so from kind of looking at that, I don't believe that this meets the intent of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything further before we take the matter into committee? Okay, I see none. Let's have a recommendation. Go ahead, Mr. Toski.
Madam Chair, unfortunately, I find myself being the negative one tonight. Madam Chair, I believe Mr. Hardcastle's comments are correct. This is more appropriate a zoning bylaw amendment or a temporary use bylaw, not a minor variance. I think the official plan and the zoning bylaw are clear. It's a use in association with accessory to primary use. Whether it was industry diesel operating an unrelated storage or it's Musket, it doesn't meet the definition of in association with the primary use. With that, I do not believe this application meets the intent of the official plan or the zoning bylaw, and I would move that it be denied.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Toski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, Mr. Hardcastle.
I'll just take a moment to echo Mr. Tulowski's comments and to add my own additional piece above and beyond that, and that is that further that the parking of transitory vehicles, heavy vehicles in this case, are not going to in any way, shape, or form contribute to the economic needs of the town or this area, and will, if approved, particularly without restriction, will take lands away from their ability to contribute to the employment needs of the town in the future. I think so. Anyways, I will be supporting the motion on the floor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Any further comments? I see none. So the motion on the table is to deny this application as it does not meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act. All those in support? Okay, all those opposed? And the chair abstains. The motion passes and the application has been denied. Thank you and have a good night. Okay, the last item on our agenda is CAV 079 of 2024 at 2092 Seabrook Drive. Again, that's CAV 079 of 2024 at 2092 Seabrook Drive, deferred from October the 2nd. Good evening, Mr. Barton. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to be back before the committee. We appreciate the opportunity that we've had to discuss this application with staff. The primary concern that originally at the time this was brought forward related to the second floor massing and how that related to the ground floor massing. So I think we're now on the same page with staff based on the staff report that's now before you. So this area is one that's characterized by a mix of dwellings. So we do see 1- and 2-story dwellings with and without attached garages. But there are examples, a number of examples of replacement dwellings that have been constructed that update the housing stock. So the proposal that's before the committee is demolition of the existing 1-story dwelling and construction of a new 2-story dwelling with an integral garage on the east side. So the intent has been to, and the design that's before the committee is to comply with the regulations for maximum height, lot coverage, and all of the building setbacks. The building's also been designed to include no ground floor windows on the east or west side, and a limited number of windows on the second floor as shown on the east and west elevations. And then the dwelling's also been situated so that it aligns with the front wall of the existing dwelling to the east. So as a result, there's only 2 variances that have been brought forward, and only one relates to the actual, I guess you would describe as the scale of the dwelling. So as staff noted in the report, the number for the maximum floor area ratio slightly changed. It was based only on how it was calculated. But there was no change to the plans as they were originally submitted. So there's the variance for maximum floor area ratio of 45%, so 45.04, and then the window well at the rear is for it's related to the width. So based on the window well being 4.27 meters in width, it's not allowed to encroach. So the encroachment is that there is an encroachment of a window well that's wider than 1.8 meters. So again, as noted in the staff report, the original deferral was to give us time to work with staff to come back with some additional information, primarily on how the building has been designed to minimize impact on scale and massing. So elements of the proposal, the proposal does provide a building envelope that complies with the as-of-right permissions of the zoning. So speaking to the permitted height, setbacks, and lot coverage, the building fits within all those performance standards. So the intent was that the proposed dwelling would be compatible and respectful with the surrounding neighborhood, as well as the what was permitted in the neighborhood. So there was an intent to also take into consideration the irregular pie-shaped nature of this lot. So the minimum side yard setbacks are being provided even at the locations where the lot narrows, so that to ensure that that setback is provided to the neighboring properties, even in an area where the lot does narrow down. The dwelling does taper down in height and massing towards the side lot lines, in addition to, as I had noted, providing a minimal number of windows on the side elevations. As I indicated, because the variance is really of concern and was of concern to the staff was the floor area ratio. The building itself does fit within the permitted building envelope and is actually smaller than would be permitted. So through these additional elevations that we provided to staff, we're able to demonstrate that the second floor does provide a reduction in massing and scale relative to the ground floor. So that really is the intent of the floor area ratio, is to see that you don't have two full stories stacked on top of one another. So I provided my opinion in my justification report that the tests of minor variance are met. Again, I provided my opinion that really the intent of the regulation for floor area is to ensure that you don't have a dwelling that is out of character with the neighborhood in terms of scale and density, so that you, by providing that maximum floor area ratio, you're really seeking to have a ground floor that then sees a reduction in the massing of the second floor relative to the ground floor. So the plans that we've provided have shown how it's been designed to do that. My opinion is that the variances are not going to materially change to the built form that could be constructed without these variances. So as I noted, at the rear, the variance related to the encroachment, it's because of the width of the staircase that the encroachment is not permitted, as opposed to the encroachment itself not being permitted. So I do think the real issue here relates to the floor area ratio that was requested. Again, we're sticking within the building envelope that can be provided, and then also providing a tapering of massing and scale above the ground floor. And it's also important to keep in mind that the pie-shaped nature of the lot results in a lot area that is smaller than if it was a rectangle. So then again, that comes into the consideration of how the massing works within the lot. So again, my opinion is that the proposal, and in particular as the additional details we provided to staff, meet the 4 tests, and we do appreciate the feedback we received from staff and the opportunity to provide additional details on how their concerns were addressed in this proposal.
Madam Chair has been kicked out of Zoom. She's just trying to get back in.
Apologies. I got kicked out of Zoom for some reason. Yeah, presentation, I will just moderate. I'll let the committee members take it from here. Are there any questions or any items of clarification of Mr. Barton? Okay, I see none. Has anyone called with interest for this application, Madam Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair, there are no calls.
Okay, very well. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based on my review of the owner's application, the site plans, building elevations, my site visit, and the presentation by the owner's consultant, and the planning staff's report, I am satisfied that the variances are minor in nature and conform to the 4 tests under the Planning Act And I put for a motion that the application is applied for be approved, subject to the conditions that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated July 17th, 2023, and revised June 19th, 2024, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the approval if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dick. Is there discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, and the chair abstains. Your application has been approved.
Thank you.
Okay, we have minutes to confirm for October 30th. Mr. Hardcastle, thank you. And motion to adjourn. Mr. Hardcastle, thank you. We are adjourned at 8:51.